This is the North Mobile Post Radio Show, and I am your host, David Merrill. In today's news, a shooting at the Empire State Building left 2 men dead, one of them being the shooter. There was one other victim. It is believed the incident was the act of a disgruntled former employee at one of the businesses located within the Empire State Building. In other news, Apple won a big court decision against Samsung to the tune of $1 billion. They were awarded damages for patent infringements, of which there are 5 from Samsung, notably the multi-touch features and bounce-back scroll of their Samsung smartphones. And in a final bit of news, Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke announced that the Federal Reserve could do more to reduce unemployment. In a letter to House lawmakers, he touted what the Federal Reserve has already done and said more monetary stimulus may be in order to fix the economy. Now let's bounce back to the first story, the Empire State shooting. There have been a lot of shootings this year so far, a lot of high-profile shootings, the Colorado shooting, the shooting at the Sikh temple, and this has got a lot of people talking about gun control. Now, this incident, from what I've read so far, the shooter's name was Jeffrey Johnson, a 58-year-old former employee at Hazen Imports, whatever it's called, and he was recently fired or laid off, and he had a beef with, I believe this was his supervisor, the other victim in this case, Stephen Ercolino. And the shooter had no priors, he had no criminal record prior to this incident, and this is a perfect example of why more gun control is not going to stop incidents like this from happening. This man, this Jeffrey Johnson, no prior record, short of banning guns altogether, this guy could have got his hands on a gun, no matter what the restrictions were. He had a clean record. This is a guy who just went off the deep end. And we have to understand that ultimately there's no way to stop that. If this man wanted to kill another man, he's going to do it. There's just so many ways to accomplish that feat. He could have brought in a knife, and then what? Are we going to outlaw knives? Even if we outlaw knives, you can't outlaw sharp objects. If one human wants to kill another human bad enough, he can do it. That is just the price we pay to live in a society of free will, not even a free society. This is just free will. Even in a communist country, such an act could be happen. So there's really no way to stop incidents like this from happening altogether. We should have good gun control to keep criminals from getting weapons, but there's no way you can stop a man like this from committing an act like this. And it seems like there's more shootings. I don't have any stats in front of me, but this reminds me of a story from last year, the year before, when there were all these mass animal die-offs. And it was all over the news. We had all the birds die around the 4th of July, or it was around New Year's, I can't remember which. But a bunch of birds just dropped dead out of the sky. Then a bunch of fish showed up dead, and everybody freaked out and thought, oh my God, this is crazy. This is the end of the world. But then scientists had to come forth and say, no, this is fairly common. The only difference between now and in the past when this has happened is that now we have a 24-hour news cycle that covers these things. These sort of things happened all the time, you just didn't hear about it. And it's the same with these shootings. This shooting, it's a terrible thing. 2 people were killed and 9 others were injured, but these sort of things happen all the time. You look at how many people have been killed in Chicago this year. It's, I believe, more than have been killed in Afghanistan, more troops that have been killed in Afghanistan. There's a lot of shootings in this country. There's a lot of violence, and it's mostly due to poverty and other issues. But it just seems like there's been a spike in these mass shootings lately, but that's mostly because of the reporting. We have a 24-hour news cycle. We hear about it more. And clearly we've got to do more to fix the problem. But, tighter gun laws alone, this case proves, are not going to be enough. This man could have bought a gun unless we outlawed him. And you can't outlaw guns. It's unconstitutional. You'd have to have a constitutional amendment to overturn the Second Amendment, and that's not happening within our lifetime. So, short of that, there's no way this incident could have been stopped. This man had a clean record. He could have got his hands on a weapon if he wanted to. And now let's move on to the next story, Apple versus Samsung. This is a very tricky situation here, and this is something I've been grappling with for a while, the patent system in this country. This case, Apple was awarded $1 billion in damages, and they're possibly or probably going to go after Samsung and try to get their phones off the market. The problem with this is we are stifling innovation now at this point. It's like is Apple going to be the only smartphone on the market? Because if they're going after Samsung, and Samsung uses Android, which many other smartphones use, they're going to probably attempt to take down a lot of phones that use that system, or all of them. And it's not good for consumers. We need competition. We need, different phones. And the types of things that are getting patented now are just getting a little ridiculous. This is multi-touch features, bounce back, scroll. These are gestures you do with your hands on the phone. And, Mark Cuban, billionaire. He owns the Dallas Mavericks. He made his money in technology. He knows a lot about this, and he has stated that in these last few years, patent lawsuits have just been increasing. It used to be you'd only get a couple, and now he says it's happening multiple times a year. He owns other tech companies now, and he's facing that. He said there's been a definite increase in patent litigation, and it's just not the way we want to do business in this country, where everything you build, you're going to get faced with multiple lawsuits with other companies trying to take it off the market. So clearly we are in need of patent reform in America. We need a better way. I mean, we can't, Mark Cuban has even said, I think he wants to get rid of patents altogether. I'm not sure that's the way to go, because that would really hurt little companies. A little company comes up with a nice innovation, and then, without patents to protect it, a bigger company could swoop in, do the same thing, but because of their mass production capabilities, they could do it far cheaper, and just, the little guy gets crushed. So there's problems with that. We can't just outright get rid of patents, but clearly we need limits. We have to change the system. Otherwise, look at Google. Google went and bought Motorola. They spent billions of dollars to buy this phone company, basically just to get their hands on the patents. And it's not good for American business. It's not good for the American consumer. This is something that is going to have to be looked at. And Samsung has already announced their intention to appeal this decision, but that could cost them. They could end up paying more at this point if it goes further. But they really have no choice, because if they don't go forward, they're probably going to end up getting their phones pulled off the market. And I believe they've recently passed Apple. They're the #1 phone seller in the world. And that's not what they do not want their products coming off the shelves right now. So we'll have to keep watching this situation, and we'll see where it goes from here. Now, lastly, I want to talk about the Federal Reserve. Ben Bernanke coming out and admitting the Federal Reserve could do more to drop unemployment, which is part of its job. Its job is to, regulate inflation and try to keep unemployment low. And it hasn't been doing a good job of that. And it's really, you have to wonder if this is getting political in nature. Is the Federal Reserve going to step in and do something before the election? Because if it does, it's likely to help the economy. It doesn't take a rocket science to figure out the Federal Reserve could do more to help unemployment. Pretty much every economist in the world is saying that. And will they do it before the election, though, is the whole key. If they don't, that's going to hurt President Obama, and if they do, it's going to help him. So either way they move, it's going to be viewed as political. But at this point, I think they really have to move because the economy is stuck in neutral. Growth in China is slowing down. The Eurozone is falling into recession. If something is not done now, if we stay in neutral like we are now, we're going to end up falling down the hill and going in full reverse before long. And nobody wants that, or nobody should want that, I should say. I'm sure some opponents of President Obama wouldn't mind if that happened for a few months and got Mitt Romney elected, but it's not good for the country. We don't need to go back into recession now. We haven't fully recovered from the last recession. We need to move forward. We need to get this economy growing again, growing strongly. It has been growing, but the growth has been very weak. We need more growth, stronger growth, and the Federal Reserve is probably going to have to step in there. We need more liquidity. The banks got to get to lending again, and interest rates are already at record lows. They're talking about the Fed doing other things, such as buying bonds to lower rates to encourage more borrowing and spending. And something's got to be done. This economy is just not good enough, and Congress is not going to act. Ben Bernanke has been pushing Congress to do something. He's been saying that he doesn't want to do anything more. He wants to hold the Federal Reserve's final bullets. Keep them in the holster, keep them in the gun for now, because in case the economy did fall into recession, the Fed could then move to do something and help us out of a recession. He doesn't want to use the last of his ammo before the real crap hits the fan. But it looks like that's what's going to have to happen, because Congress has not acted. They have done nothing this year to help create jobs. President Obama came up with his plan. The Republicans have come up with their plan. Compromise is a dirty word right now in Washington, so expect nothing from Washington before the election. I'm assuming after the election there'll probably be a very busy lame duck session of Congress where we'll have a deal done on the Bush tax cuts. That's probably about it, though. There might be some other legislation, but Obama's jobs bill is not going to get passed this year. The Republican agenda is not going to get passed this year. Tax cuts are the whole thing, and that's going to really depend on how if Obama wins, expect his version of the Bush tax cuts to go forward, where only those making $250,000 or less are given tax cuts, and the taxes go up on the rich. I don't see Republicans letting all of the tax cuts expire. That would just be politically devastating to them. Even though the elections would be over, they would get shellacked the next time around. You got to remember the midterms are only 2 years away. The House of Representatives, they're constantly in election mode. So there's no way they would allow all of the tax cuts to expire. And if President Obama wins, that's pretty much, a mandate for him and his version of the tax cuts to go forward. So they'll have to come along with it. And I don't see them passing his jobs bill, though. The only way his jobs bill passes is if the Democrats are able to retake control of the House and keep control of the Senate. And then they could move forward with that next year when the new session begins. But this year, don't expect anything. So the Federal Reserve, it will have to move forward with some kind of action. They could do more of their twisting, where they sell long-term bonds or short-term bonds for longer-term bonds just to get more capital into the market. But there's been other talk of other things they can do, such as buying some of more mortgage-backed securities, get some of these assets off the bank's hands, or just buying more bonds. Whatever it is, we definitely need a boost right now. The economy is growing, and if they could just give it this little push, we could get some real growth in before this year ends. We started the year in such a good roll with 200,000 jobs being created a month, and then spring hit and it just all went to hell. And now we are stuck in neutral, and if Washington can't move, the Fed has to. Something has to be done. All these political games are really hurting the American people. They are the ones who suffer through Washington's inaction. And that's the news for today. Be sure to tune back in tomorrow for more headlines and more opinions, and we'll see you then.